Good afternoon, everybody. So, I'm just starting with the general introduction so that we'll buy time for others to join. Before starting, I would like to thank our office bearers from TIPSTN chapter, Dr. Sadanand sir, Dr. Babu Balasingh sir, Dr. Arun Kumar sir, and also Dr. K. Satyamurthy sir, Arul Saravanan sir, and PP Kanan sir. Especially the RCBC committee members, including Sivanand sir, me myself, Vanishri ma'am, Dr. Dheeraj, Dr. R. Munathan, Dr. Divya, and Dr. Swaran sir. So, with all their combined efforts, we are conducting this meeting in every fourth Saturday. They've been doing it successfully. This is an attempt to do a case control study. So, from Mada Medical College, uh, she's a second year practically now. Since first years have not joined, she's a senior first year PG. Dr. Meghna Sri, she would present the article. This article has been put well in advance in the group and circulated to everybody. It's a very simple article, retrospective study. So I've asked her to do just a critical appraisal. So start with the critical appraisal. If there's any doubt in between, you can ask her, or you can even go through the article. Article full text is also available in the group. So once others can joining, we'll start it now.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Meghna, second year postgraduate in Mada Medical College, Chennai. Today, I will be presenting a critical appraisal of a study published in Indian Journal of Psychological Medicine in 2015. This study examines adherence to buprenorphine maintenance treatment in patients with opioid dependence syndrome. The authors are Bandavar and colleagues from NIMHANS Bangalore. It is basically a retrospective study comparing three different treatments for opioid dependence. Before we dive into the details, I want to emphasize that critical appraisal does not mean criticism. Our goal is to systematically know about the strengths and limitations of this research to determine how confidently we can apply these findings to our clinical practice. Let me begin by providing an overview of the study and objectives. Opioid use disorder is a major public health problem in India. According to World Health Organization data from 2010, India had approximately 8,71,000 heroin users and 6,71,000 opium users. These numbers are now over a decade old and likely underestimate the current burden. There has been a paradigm shift from naltrexone maintenance treatment to opioid substitution therapy, which medications like buprenorphine and methadone are being used. The authors aim to compare the effectiveness of three treatment approaches. Firstly is buprenorphine maintenance treatment, secondly is naltrexone maintenance treatment, and thirdly is psychosocial treatment alone. The primary outcome. The main outcome was treatment retention at 6 months and 1 year. The reason is that patients who stay in this treatment are more likely to achieve recovery, reduce substance use, and avoid complications like HIV infection or overdose death. Coming to the setting and sample, the study was conducted in NIMHANS Bangalore, which is one of India's premier mental health institution. They collected data from January 2005 to December 2012, giving them an 8-year observation period. The total sample size is 248 patients with opioid dependence syndrome. According to ICD-10 criteria, F11 criteria has been used. Now, we come to our first major finding in this critical appraisal. There is a fundamental error in how the authors have classified their study design. The authors state in their paper that this is a case control study with retrospective design. However, this is incorrect. This is actually a retrospective cohort study. Let me explain why this distinction matters. In a cohort study, you select participants based on their exposure status. In this case, the exposure is the type of treatment received, that is DMT, NMT, or PST. You then follow these groups forward in time to see what happens to them. The outcome here is whether they remained in the treatment or those who dropped out. In case of a case control study, you would do the opposite. You would select participants based on their outcome status. The cases are those who stayed in the treatment, whereas the controls are those who dropped out. You would then look backward to see what treatments they had received. Why this study is a cohort design is that Looking at what the authors actually did, they identified patients by the treatment they received. They had three exposure groups. They followed these groups forward in time to see adherence outcomes. The outcome sequence, the temporal sequence is very clear. Treatment came first and then the outcome was measured. Moving forward, for the rest of this presentation, we will evaluate the study as a retrospective cohort study, which is what it is actually is. We will use appropriate stroke checklists for cohort study. This is the stroke checklist for cohort study. STROBE basically stands for Strengthening the Reporting of Observational Studies in Epidemiology. It is a 22-item checklist specific for each study. Before we critique the study, let me present what the authors actually found. This will help us keep the bigger picture in mind as we evaluate the methodology. The study included 248 patients with the following characteristics. In gender distribution, it is nearly 90% were male. The mean age was 30 years with a standard deviation of 8.5 years. About one third of the 31.45 percentage intravenous drug users were studied. The mean dose for buprenorphine is 4.3 milligram per day, which is relatively low. Now let's see the treatment retention rates. The study has treatment retention rates. The authors have concentrated at 6 months and 12 months. At 6 months and 12 months, each BMT, NMT, and PST have the amount of percentage patients have been retained. There is a clear separation between the three groups. BMT has the highest retention, followed by NMT, with PST showing the poorest retention. The gap widens over time. Now let's see the odds ratio at 1 year. BMT versus PST, the odds ratio is 7. This means the BMT patients have 7 times the odds of being retained compared to PST patients. This is highly significant. When you come to BMT versus NMT, the odds ratio is 4.1. BMT still shows a substantial advantage over NMT. But when we compare NMT versus PST, the odds ratio is 1.9, which is reported as not significant. Notice what is missing from this results. There is no confidence intervals around any of these estimates, no absolute numbers per treatment group, no adjusted analysis for potential confounders. These omissions are red flags that we will be discussing in detail. Now, we begin our systematic appraisal using the STROBE checklist. Let's start with item 1. Item 1 covers title and abstract. In item 1, it is again divided into item 1A and item 1B. Item 1 requires that the study design to be indicated in the title. Item 1B required a structured abstract with background, methods, results, and conclusions. Now, when we come to the assessment, the design is mentioned in the title. Looking at the abstract, it is structured with clear sections, which is very good. Background and objectives are stated, methods are briefly described, key results are presented, and conclusions are provided. So far, this seems adequate. The abstract is often the only part of a paper that people read. If critical information is missing from the abstract, readers may overestimate the strength of the evidence. Someone reading only this abstract might think there is strong evidence for BMT superiority without realizing the significant methodological limitations. Now, again, let's go to the assessment. There is no correct design stated. The abstract structured is structured in the right format. Key results are included in the abstract. There is no confidence intervals in the abstract, and the sample size for each group is not mentioned. Moving to the introduction section. STROBE item 2 and 3. They require a clear background, rationale, and objectives. The authors do provide an adequate background on opioid dependence as it is a major public health problem. They explain the shift from naltrexone to opioid substitution therapy. Here, the authors are very clear in their rationale. This portion is satisfactory. The objectives stated are though somewhat very vague. The authors say that they want to compare the three treatments, DMT, NMT, and PST. But how do they specify? What they hypothesize? What difference would be clinically meaningful? What specific research questions they are addressing? This is a minor weakness, but not uncommon in observational studies. Here is a major, more significant concern. Let me draw your attention to their references. Reference 2 cites national survey data from 2004, which was 11 years old at time of publication in 2015. The prevalence estimate is 0.7 percentage they cite, which is outdated. When you come to reference 3, they use treatment seeker data from 2005, which is again a 10 years old publication. Why this matters is that opioid use patterns change over time. New substances emerge, routes of administration shift, and demographics evolve. More recent data was certainly available in 2015. Using decade old data suggests the authors did not conduct a thorough literature review. This does not invalidate the study, but it raises questions about the thoroughness of the approach. Now, coming back to the assessment, the background was adequately explained, rationale was clearly explained by the authors, the objectives were not stated, and the hypotheses were not specified. Now we enter the method section, which is where most of the serious problems emerge. Items 4 to 7 indicates study design, settings, eligibility criteria, and outcome definitions. The design should be clearly described in the method section with the rationale for why this study design was chosen. The authors simply state that case control study with retrospective design with no further explanation. When we come to the settings, the author has provided NIMHANS Bangalore from January 2005 to December 2012. This is adequate. We know where and why the study took place. When we come to eligibility criteria, the requirement is we have to clearly state the inclusion and the exclusion criteria. But what the authors provide is that they only state that patients diagnosed with opioid dependence syndrome as per ICD 10 F11 criteria. What is missing is that who decided treatment type, what were the criteria, were the physician preference prompted, patient choice, disease severity, ability to pay, insurance coverage, and did this change over 8 years period? Were there any age restrictions? Were patients with psychiatric comorbidities excluded? Were patients with medical contraindications excluded? Were pregnant women indicated or excluded? Who decided which treatment, which criteria were used were also not mentioned. This information is completely absent. Now let's see the outcome definitions. The authors provide regular follow-up and compliance. According to authors, regular follow-up is a bit vague. Does this mean attending scheduled appointments, taking medication as prescribed, providing urine samples, any combination drugs have been used? What frequency constitutes regular according to these authors? How was compliance verified? Who determined the compliance? These definitions are far too imprecise. I want to spend extra time on what I consider the most critical methodological flaw in this study: the complete absence of information about how patients were allocated to treatments. How did patients end up in BMT versus NMT versus PST groups? This may seem like a simple question, but the answer has a profound implication for interpreting the results. In observational studies, unlike randomized controlled trial, patients are not randomly assigned to treatments. This means groups may differ in systematic ways that affect outcomes. Let me walk you through several plausible scenarios. In scenario 1, suppose physicians tend to give BMT to more severely dependent patients, NMT to moderately dependent patients, and PST to mildly dependent patients. If BMT still shows better outcomes despite treating sicker patients, the true effect might be even larger than observed. The study would underestimate BMT's benefit. When we come to scenario 2, suppose if BMT was only offered to patients who could afford it or had any insurance. Wealthier patients likely have a more stable housing, better family support, more employment, better overall health, and higher education. All of these factors independently improve treatment retention. The observed benefit of DMT might actually reflect the benefit of socio-economic advantage, not the medication itself. The study would overestimate BMT's benefit. We simply do not know which scenario applies or whether some combination is at play. The authors provide no information about allocation. Without knowing the allocation, we cannot determine the direction of bias, the magnitude of bias, and whether results have any validity at all. Continuing with the method section, items 9 to 12 cover bias, sample size, variable handling, and statistical methods. There is no discussion of potential bias or the strategies on how to minimize such bias. Sample size calculations tell us whether a study is adequately powered to detect meaningful differences. Without this, we do not know if negative results are true negatives or just insufficient power. We cannot determine if the study could detect clinically important differences. We cannot assess whether the study was properly planned. With 248 patients divided into three groups, approximately if we keep 83 each, this is probably adequate for detecting large differences. But we are guessing that the authors could have calculated and reported this. Next, coming to handling of variables, the authors provided nothing specific of that sort. When we come to age, duration of use, and dose, these are continuous variables. They could have provided were they used as a continuous or categorized, where distributions checked for normality, where any transformations apply. We do not know. Coming to statistical methods, the authors have provided chi-square test, odds ratio, Kaplan-Meier analysis, and log-rank testing. However, critical omissions are there is no adjustment for any confounders, no handling of missing data, no sensitivity analysis. The basic statistical tests mentioned are appropriate, but the absence of adjustment for confounding is a fatal flaw. Without this, we cannot make a causal inference. Moving to the results section. Items 13 and 14 cover participant flow and baseline characteristics. Coming to participant flow, the requirement is there should be a report of number of individuals at each stage with reasons for non-participation. A flow diagram is strongly recommended according to Stobe checklist. What could have been shown is that the total eligible patients, number of patients enrolled, which is the sample size, how many are allocated to BMT, NMT, and PST, and at 6 months and 1 year, that is 12 months, how many patients were retained and how many of them lost in each section, comparing BMT, NMT, and PST. None of this was there. We get only percentages at two time points, 6 months and 12 months, with no absolute numbers and no flow diagram. Coming to baseline characteristics. The requirement is the study participants overall should be presented by exposure group. What the authors provided is that overall characteristics only by age, sex, and IV use with no stratification by treatment group. There should be a table like this. This table serves multiple critical purposes. First, it allows readers to assess whether groups were comparable at baseline if the BMT group was systematically different. This could explain better outcome. Secondly, it identifies potential confounders that should be controlled in the study analysis. Thirdly, it helps assess the generalizability of findings. If the BMT group looks very different from typical patients, results may not generalize. Fourthly, it is a foundation for detecting selection bias. We have no idea whether the groups were comparable or widely different. Coming to arithmetic errors, the authors report that street opioids constitute 22% and pharmaceutical constitute 81%. This adds to 103%, which is impossible for mutually exclusive categories. Similarly, coming to oral or inhalational users, which is 75%, and intravenous drug users, which is 31%, sums up to 106%. Again, the categories overlap, but this should have been explained clearly by the authors. I want to emphasize just how critical the missing baseline characteristics table is. Let me show you what could have been added. The sample size for each group, mean age and standard deviation for each group, proportion of male in each group, proportion with IV users in each group, mean duration of opioid use, proportion with previous treatment, employment status, psychiatric comorbidities, and any other relevant baseline variables. In this study, we have none of this information. The Strobe statement explicitly requires this table. Now let's go to items 15 to 17, which covers outcomes including crude and adjusted estimates and subgroup analysis. What the authors provide is that percentages retained at 6 months and 12 months for each group. What is missing is that absolute numbers are missing. We get 68% of BMT patients, but not how many patients that represent. Is it 68 patients out of 100 or 68 patients out of 80%? We cannot tell. Crude estimates with confidence intervals. What the authors provide is that the odds ratio is there, the p value is reported, but there are no confidence intervals. This is a major violation of reporting standards, which leads to poor reporting quality. Now let's see about confounders. What the authors provide is that there are no discussion about confounders at all. Other analysis, the authors do present a subgroup analysis examining intravenous drug users separately from oral and inhalational techniques. Problems with this analysis is that there is no sample size given for subgroups, no confidence intervals, subgroup analysis attempted but inadequately executed. Coming to Kaplan-Meier analysis. The authors present a Kaplan-Meier survival analysis in figure 1. Let me explain what is missing from this important analysis. Figure 1 displays three curves, BMT, NMT, PST, showing retention over 12 months. The authors report log rank test p-value indicating significant difference between curves. First, the numbers at risk. Below the x-axis, there should be a table showing how many patients remain in each group at each point of time, which is not mentioned. Second, censoring marks. Kaplan-Meier curve should show tick marks indicating when patients were censored. That is, when the patients dropped out of the study, it should have been censored mark. No censoring marks are shown in this image. Third, confidence bands. The curve should have shaded areas or dashed lines showing 95% of confidence intervals around the survival estimate. No confidence bands are shown. Fourth, median survival time. The median time to drop out is a key summary measure, which is not reported by the authors. Fifth, complete statistical reporting. This study only reports p-value less than 0.001 with no other details. Sixth, table of survival estimates. There should be a table showing survival probability at key time points with confidence intervals, which is not provided in this study. Seventh, the y-axis labeling could have been even better. The y-axis is labeled as percentage of patient, which should be proportion retained or retention probability. The figure shows only three time points, which is 0, 6 months, 12 months, and the curves look like straight lines connecting these points. True Kaplan-Meier curves are step functions that change at each event time. Let me walk through the potential confounders that could have been controlled. According to age, younger patients generally have better treatment outcomes. Duration of opioids use, longer duration predicts worse outcomes and lower retention. Previous treatment attempts, multiple previous treatment failures indicate more severe treatment resistant dependence. And coming to route of administration, intravenous drug use indicates more severe dependence than oral or inhalational type. In types of opioid use, heroin dependence is generally more severe than pharmaceutical opioid dependence. In employment status, employment is one of the strongest predictors of treatment success. Employed patients have stability, routine, and purpose. Coming to family and social support, it strongly predicts good retention. Coming to legal or forensic involvement, that is, the legal supervision may affect continuation. Moving to the discussion section. Items 18 to 21 cover interpretation of results, limitation, and generalizability. What the authors provide is that they do summarize the main findings clearly, that BMT shows superior retention compared to NMT and PST. Effect is seen at both 6 and 12 months. Low dose BMT appears effective. The assessment also tells that it is adequate. Coming to limitations, what the authors acknowledge is that The retrospective design mentioned in the study limits causal inference. The limited outcomes, they note they only examine retention, not other important outcomes like quality of life, substance use, HIV risk, or criminal activity. According to clinic based sample, they acknowledge this may limit generalizability to community settings. These acknowledgements are appropriate. According to the authors, these are the limitations reported in the study. What the authors failed to acknowledge is that there is no baseline comparability. No mention that groups were not compared at baseline, which is a critical flaw. No adjustment for confounding. There is no selection bias and cannot infer causation. These are the major limitations and they are not adequately discussed in this study. Coming to interpretation, they interpret their findings as showing DMT is more effective than alternatives. This language implies causation. Given the limitations, causation cannot be claimed. This study does not discuss bias direction. They do not explain whether results might overestimate or underestimate the true effect. BMT, BMT was associated with higher retention compared to NMT and PST in this observational study. However, without adjustment for potential confounders and with unknown treatment allocation mechanisms, we cannot determine whether this association is causal or not. Coming to generalizability, they acknowledge the study was conducted in a specialized tertiary care center, which may limit the generalizability to other settings. NIMHANS is a highly specialized center with expert staff, adequate resources, and motivated patients who travel to reach this facilitated center. Results may not generalize to primary care settings, district hospitals, private practitioners, and rural areas. BMT in less specialized settings might not achieve similar results. Coming to the last checklist, which is funding sources and role. The final strobe item covers funding and other administrative information. Coming to funding, there is no such funding information mentioned. Readers need this information to assess potential bias. While the authors declare there is no conflict of interest, funding sources should be still have to be disclosed. Beyond strobe, other important elements also could have been reported. No ethics approval mentioned. There is no informed consent discussed. Now let me summarize our complete strobe assessment and show you the overall compliance rate. The total score is 10 out of 31 possible points, which sums up to a percentage of 32%. Coming to the interpretation framework, more than 80% shows excellent reporting, 60 to 79% shows good reporting, whereas 40 to 59% shows moderate reporting, and less than 40% shows poor reporting. According to this, our study has 32%, which shows kind of poor reporting. Coming to strengths and weaknesses of this study, when we look about the strengths, the sample size is large, which is 248. There is adequate follow up, which is 12 months. Real world clinical setting is used. Important clinical questions. The findings consistent with literature. This includes dose information for buprenorphine, and they have also examined intravenous drug users separately. Coming to critical weaknesses. Wrong design, as mentioned earlier. No adjustment for confounders, which is a fatal flaw. There is no baseline comparability shown. No confidence intervals. The selection bias not addressed. Arithmetic errors in data. Incomplete statistical reporting. Outdated references used by the authors. There is no sample size calculation and vague outcome definition. When there is no adjustment for confounders, they show associations but cannot establish causation. Coming to number needed to treat. A more clinically interpretable measure is the number needed to treat. What is number needed to treat? It is the number of patients who need to receive the treatment for one additional patient to benefit. In this study, the number needed to treat of 2 to 3 is excellent clinically. For every 2 to 3 patients treated with BMT instead of PST, one additional patient remains in the treatment. Whereas For every 3 to 4 patients treated with BMT instead of NMT, one additional patient remains in the treatment. Can we apply this to our clinical settings, especially in Tamil Nadu? If you think about that, the similarities are yes, it can be done in South Indian population, in tertiary care setting, similar healthcare system. There is a mix of street and pharmaceutical opioids and can be compared to any other socio-economic context. Difference is that NIMHANS, which is highly a specialized center, may have more resources when compared to tertiary care, other tertiary cares. The may be higher, staff's expertise may be higher, and urban Bangalore will not be anywhere equal to any other settings. When we come to PICO assessment, which tells about population, intervention, comparison, and outcome. In case of population, probably generalizable, but with caution about case mix differences. In case of intervention, feasible but requires infrastructure and training. When we come to comparison, study comparisons partially relevant, but current practice has shifted towards opioid substitution therapy. When we come to outcome, it is relevant and important. My take home messages are the study design matters in any study, the confounding is critical, reporting standards exist, the critical appraisal is essential, and clinical context matters. Thank you for your patient listening. These are my references.
Thank you, Meghna, for your detailed and extensive critical appraisal with the strobe and.
Thank you, sir.
You have tried with a new method? Fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Meghna. Thank you for your excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, we'll all leave the meeting. Thank you.